Hello and welcome to Unexplained UFO Encounters Seen by the Military. You would think I could find a shorter title than that, but my mind's run blank. Before starting this, I wanted to say that I'm sorry for the delay in the upload of this video. Over the past few days, we had a medical issue that required our attention. This included late Sunday night and early morning. In a video a few weeks ago, I talked about UFO sightings that were never given an explanation. Well, the upload has garnered quite a bit of attention, which I can only assume means it is a topic that all of you quite enjoy. So in keeping with this, I decided to hit the drawing board again and bring to you a few sightings that came from or greatly involved military personnel. Just so you are aware, I will be returning next week with something related to cryptids or hauntings. Also, this isn't a video about the Navy pilots' radar sightings that have been making their rounds on the news, since I've already talked about that topic recently. When it comes to UFO sightings, these reports come from normal people like us, and quickly officials swoop in and either debunk the claims or make every attempt to cover up or silence the information from making too much noise. If you watched my video on Project Blue Book, you know the pages are filled with this exact type of activity. However, there is a reverse side to this, where the sightings occur at military bases or to similar personnel. Granted, these are normally covered up as well, but you may be interested to know that these encounters happen more often than you may think. We are starting off with a huge one, since it doesn't involve one location or one time period, but it is a very concerning pattern stretched out over 14 years, and is continuing to this day. While researching this topic, I came across a few pages that discussed UFO involvement with bases housing missiles, as well as these craft affecting tests of rockets. Many of the links provided were no longer available, but as this type of problem is my forte, I was able to dive deep and find some facts that are now apparently lost. However, due to this, there will be a few times where I can only provide minimal information, but it all serves to paint a broader picture. On January 10, 1961, the Navy was testing their nuclear-capable Polaris missile at Cape Canaveral, Florida. Everything seemed to be going fine, and all systems appeared to be working normally. With this test, an outline was set up to track each stage of the rocket's flight. During the flight, the radar scope used to track the missile suddenly became locked onto another target that was appearing to enter from outer space. This craft flew close to the missile and was able to maintain the same amount of speed. Many claimed it seemed like the craft was inspecting the rocket. Suddenly, without warning, the missile's transponder began to malfunction and it flew off course. Record after record showed that everything was fine with the rocket up until the strange craft showed up. Officially, the event was ruled a success, and when discussion about the UFO was brought up, it was deemed just a case of a defective radar. On August 7, 1962, at the Titan missile silo in Oracle, Arizona, a crew member was outside when he noticed a strange bright ball of light seeming to descend on the base. Curious, he went back inside to tell his co-worker, and the two then returned outside to watch the object. Suddenly, this orb became massive in size, and the men retreated inside for fear of what could happen. Not long after this, two jet fighters were scrambled to intercept the object, but it flew away in a flash. Once the jets returned to base, the object returned. Luckily, it didn't appear to do anything, since it just hovered over the silos for a while and then disappeared into the night sky. It is worth noting that during this time period, strange sightings were being spotted all over the area, namely at important landmarks. In a similar story to our first one, on September 15, 1964, the Vandenberg Air Force Base near Big Sur, California, had an unexpected outcome when they test-fired an Atlas ICBM. During the flight, a stationary camera was set up near the beach to observe the results by a man named Lieutenant Robert Jacobs, who was the officer in charge of photo-optical instrumentation. During the flight, it was planned for the rocket to land in a specific part of the Pacific Ocean where the Nike Zeus was waiting to recover it. However, all didn't go as planned, and the missile landed way off course and was considered a failed test. Later, when the footage was recovered, it was noted that the base had strange visitors in gray suits who had very serious looks on their faces. A meeting was held where the footage was reviewed, and in it showed that during the flight, a strange craft had approached the missile. It It was described as being saucer-shaped with a dome in the center that emitted 4 bright lights. The craft kept up speed with the ICBM at over 18,000 miles per hour, and to their shock, it took to orbiting the rocket. Finally, at one point, light shot out from the craft, hitting 4 points on the rocket, which caused it to veer off course. After this, the craft flew away from out of sight of the camera. It is stated that each light blast was so bright it caused an immense light bloom on the TV when it was being reviewed. Lieutenant Jacobs was asked what caused this anomaly, and he simply replied, "I think we have a UFO," to which the men in the gray suits were noted as becoming uncomfortable with that answer. Jacob was told that that meeting never happened, and he agreed to protect his career. Years later, the guilt of hiding this information became too much, and he reported everything that I just talked about. On August 25, 1966, a UFO appeared at the Minot AFB Minuteman site in North Dakota, and in doing so, proved how defenseless we are against them. On that night, Air Force officers were in a missile launch control facility when they noticed a strange object on radar over the base at an altitude of 100,000 feet. On a side note, I question this number, even though the report is fairly well documented, but that would put the craft in the stratosphere, which I am uncertain radar at that time would be able to reach. Anyway, suddenly communications from the launch control facility to the missile silos were interrupted due to the presence of static, which was assumed to be coming from the craft. All control was returned once the craft was no longer present. Of course, this incident was denied to have happened, but an investigator from the Project Blue Book, called Dr. Hynek, made a trip to the base only to discover that the craft landed in a field afterwards, and when ground troops and jeeps and F-106 jets were sent in to recover the craft, they were met with the same strong static. They were able to get close enough to see it hovering over the ground, but it took off into the sky and vanished. The base was then visited, and everyone was told that they didn't see anything. In fact, when Dr. Hynek asked about the subject, he was reminded of the penalties for military personnel to talk about unauthorized UFO information. The only statement he received was by an Air Force spokesman who said, "We're out of the UFO business." That is an odd statement, since PBB, which was part of the Air Force, wasn't ended for another 3 years. Granted, if you watched my video about that, then you know near the end, Project Blue Book was not really anything. Our final story is quite fantastic, and carries all the typical hallmarks of a sighting that was of particular military interest. Granted, the sighting doesn't quite fit in with our topic, but the military presence was enough for me to include it here. On November 17, 1986, a Boeing 747 cargo freighter known as the Japan Airlines Flight 1628 came across something unexplained as they were en route to the Narita International Airport. While flying over Alaska, the pilot named Captain Kenju Teruchi, his co-pilot Takanori Tamafuji, and flight engineer Yoshio Tsukuba started seeing 3 objects appearing to hide in the plane's shadow from the present sunset. Captain Teruchi was advised to redirect their flight to Talkeetna, Alaska by the control tower he was in contact with. As he straightened out his heading, he noticed that 2 of the unknown craft were now to his left and below their altitude. At first he assumed it was military craft, but after discussing this with the control tower, they personally confirmed that no such craft were in the air that night. Moments later, the UFOs moved quickly in front of the plane, staying about 500 to 1,000 feet from their nose. These craft were described as looking rectangular from behind, with many what appeared to be thruster nozzles that open and shut with a circular device located in each one. Captain Teruchi stated that he assumed the craft would appear cigar-shaped if seen from the side. At one point, the craft put on a reverse thrust that emitted so much light that it blinded the crew, and they could even feel the heat from it in their cockpit. These objects continued to follow the 747's path, but would slow down and speed up and use bright light on the crew multiple times. This went on for more than 10 minutes. Finally, the 2 ships veered off to below the horizon. After this, Captain Teruchi noticed a strange band of light coming from where they disappeared. As the plane neared Fairbanks, the lights from the city illuminated the sky, and to the pilot's horror, he saw a huge craft on his left side that he described as being bigger than an aircraft carrier. Many of the radar towers couldn't pick this anomaly up. However, NORAD was able to notice something odd on radar. The new craft followed the same path of the 747, but disappeared suddenly as they prepared to land. The FAA, with the pilot's interview, recorded that the incident was in fact a UFO. In December of the same year, Captain Tarucci talked about his story with Kyoto News, and after the report came out, he was subsequently removed from being a pilot and given a regular desk job. I should note here that Tarucci had over 10,000 hours logged for flying, and he was a former fighter pilot. Kyoto contacted the FAA about the report, of which they quickly moved to figure out what to tell the press. Not long after this, the flight records, radar readings, and recordings of pilot communications with the tower were all sent to Vice Admiral Donald D. Engine, who, after reviewing the information, told the FAA not to talk about any of it. Later, a committee of FBI, CIA, and President Reagan's scientific study team held a meeting to review the material, and all were advised that the meeting never took place. Afterwards, all materials were confiscated, as it was leaked that they were deemed it was the first instance of a radar recording of a UFO. 3 months later, the FAA removed the word UFO from the original report and released a statement saying that what was seen that night was a split radar image. They also said that they accepted the pilot's description, but had no proof as it being anything outside of the normal. A month later, in January of 1987, Alaska Airlines Flight 53 saw a very fast white craft flying in the same area as where Flight 1628 had their encounter. Then a few days later, a pilot in a KC-135 jet, flying over the same area, encountered what he described as a saucer-shaped craft just 40 feet from his jet. It certainly seems like something was going on in Alaska, and the military was unsure what it was. On a side note, after serving his punishment for talking to the press, Captain Tarucci was finally able to pilot a plane again after many years. I will end this topic with a quote from this year from Christopher Mellon, the former United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. "We know that UFOs exist. This is no longer an issue. The Navy itself has publicly acknowledged the fact that they exist, and Navy pilots, active duty pilots, have gone on record in the New York Times acknowledging the fact that they exist. So the issue is now, why are they here, where are they coming from, and what is the technology behind these devices that we are observing?" Now, we frequently see titles such as Christopher's thrown around, but not much context is given to them, but his job was the third highest intelligence position in the Pentagon. I see a lot of people claiming that this man is making this statement for the purpose of making money or gaining fame. While anything is possible, I find this hard to believe, since his family is the same as the Mellon Bank and Gulf Oil. Not only this, but in his career he was awarded many honors, including the National Reconnaissance Office Gold Medal. It seems strange that a man with almost 20 years of his life spent working with intelligence information, a Yale graduate, and a family that is wealthy, would risk it all for the sake of a few minutes of fame. Especially since we all know and have seen how witnesses are treated when they even mention that a UFO was spotted. So as I end this, I was curious as to what your thoughts are on this topic, and more importantly, why didn't the officials seem as concerned as they should be over a UFO breaching military airspace and disabling deadly weapons? It seemed like they were more focused on covering up the UFO part than the actual threat. I implore you to check out the Nuclear Connection Project, since they have so many reports of sightings involving the military that I couldn't fit them all in here. Here we are with this week's comments that I enjoyed. The first comes from Susan B., who says, "Yes, we are the best community on YouTube, and don't you forget it. LOL." Thank you, Susan B. This comment came in relation to me making the statement that I honestly feel that my channel has the best community on YouTube. I know you were joking, but I do truly believe this, and would never take any of you for granted. Oh, I hope I get this name right. Damaris Dingu says, "That was an awesome and interesting topic. Thank you for sharing any answers you provided to those questions," with a heart emoji. "I am happy that you enjoyed my hashtag AskBen video. One of my main goals for my channel is to give as much information as possible and to help with any questions you may have. After this video, I saw a lot of questions relating to #AskBen, so it appears I will be making another video on that in the future. Finally, we have Willie's Western Studio, who says, "Dude, can you please do at least one cryptid story from the state of Illinois? I used to live there and it was really creepy, and I had an encounter myself when I was young." Thank you, Willie. I know you used the #AskBen, but I am assuming that it wasn't a question that you wanted answered in video form, but rather like this. Which, I guess is still video form. Anyway, I would love to hear about your encounter, and of course I wouldn't post it here if you were uncomfortable with sharing it for everyone. I have seen your comments over the past few videos asking for this topic, and trust me that I will be making something on Illinois shortly. At the moment, I have more material related to haunted areas in that state, but I'll be looking into cryptids. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for content similar to this, and also, if you enjoyed this, could you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre? With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one.